Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Jason.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. So the word of the day is story. And I can tell you, Joel, as with any day, because this is going to be true for every day, story is definitely the word of my day.
Is it? Okay.
Literally, yeah. And in fact, just before we were getting started here, we're getting started a little bit later than we often do. And so I was watching Gaia Channel, because that's what I've been watching lately. And they had a special on that was recorded very, very recently, within days. And they're talking about the polarity in the world and in the country and the Middle East war. And they had a channeler on there who's trying to explain from the point of view of somebody called the Z's. I'm not quite sure who the Z's are, why all this stuff is going on and so forth. And all I could think is, wow, okay, there's another story.
Is there anything going on, Walt? I'm unaware.
I have heard, yes. There are a few things, yeah.
Okay.
Things that you and I really don't really care a whole lot about. In fact, I was thinking to myself, there's a phrase that really illustrates our viewpoint nicely. The one that we share in common, which is it doesn't matter. And what that literally means is I don't give it my attention because I don't want to turn it into matter.
Yes. And certainly don't want to dive into the issues of the day. But, when an event happens, I don't know about that when everybody else knows about it because I don't watch the news. So somebody mentioned that an event happened on Saturday that's pretty serious and or whatever day that was. And, mentioned it to me like late last night. I go, what are you talking about? And they're like, this happened. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was unaware of that. And that's really pretty much the only thing I discussed about it. Of course, at the gym this morning, people are discussing things, but it's amazing that, and a lot of people, when they say it doesn't matter, they think that we're being, uncaring or what have you. And that's not the intent. It's, what you give your attention to, the story you tell yourself is your reality. And the reality for us is my job every day is to, I create my reality by creating my story, telling my story as I want it to be. And my life responds to that story. And I say every week we talk, or almost every day on some form or fashion on my Facebook post, is your perspective, creates your reality, and you're in charge of your perspective. Your story, what you tell yourself is your story. That's what it is, and that can be good or bad. And for most people, until they figure it out, it's usually leaning toward bad because you're often telling an awful life story or a negative story, or we have these rehearsed dialogues of what could go wrong, kind of thing. And when you speak your story as you want it to be, it eventually becomes your story, and that's what you're in charge of. And and if people have never experienced, I could see where we would appear to be aloof or not caring or whatever, because it is coming from the other side. It's like bringing negative attention or worrying or focus, does nothing to help the situation. It puts everybody into this feeling that everything's falling apart, things are far worse than they really are, and that becomes your story, that becomes your reality. There's people that woke up today that really believe that we're on the edge of everything falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I woke up today, we had a great workout, got me a brand new car over the weekend. I love life and things are great. I have a different story that I'm telling.
I'm glad that you're mentioning this whole thing about compassion or the perceived lack thereof, because I agree with you, obviously. I mean, we do tend to have a very similar thought patterns, not identical. We have differences, but we are very much on the same wavelength with this. Literally, I don't want to speak any of that stuff into reality.
No.
That's the whole point. I mean, if anyone is really concerned, and there are people who are, if they're really concerned about the divide that goes on, about these power struggles that go on, about the wars that go on and so forth, stop giving them your energy.
Yeah.
Because your energy contributes to them.
Yes.
That's the big deception. The idea, well, if I just give my energy to it in a way that somehow changes it, it will change it. But that's not the way energy works.
Yeah, whether I'm working with addiction clients or law of attraction clients, one of the things that I have, I have everyone do and I remind people constantly when people, let's name the things that you're worried about that are in your direct control, things you can control. And that list is really limited of what you can control.
Yeah.
You can control your attitude, your perspective, your work ethic, the time you show up. There's stuff that you can control. Other people's opinions, other people's politics, you cannot. And the frustration created by believing you can, or you're going to argue somebody into believing that, you're going to scream at them until they believe it, is absurd. It just doesn't work. And so the launching of your own version of your story needs to be based, in my mind, on what are the controllables in my life. And that's where I place my energy every day. Again, I have a routine. I show up at the gym. I eat well. I go do my work at my office, and I repeat that consistently. That's the story that I tell myself. That's my life, and that it works perfectly for me. I don't get on sidetracks or I wish this would have happened. This could have happened. And I want no ill will toward anybody. I don't want anybody to be harmed. But at the same time, the actions of others are one of the top of the list of things we cannot control.
Right.
So telling a story that includes things you cannot control is not what we're talking about. You got to tell a story that only involves the things in your direct control.
Well, there is actually one other piece that I think is important to recognize, and this is something that I believe for quite some time, which is that we can't control what somebody else's story is, but what we can do is we can feed into it or choose not to feed into it.
Absolutely, yes.
And in the process of feeding into it, we're giving energy to it.
Yes.
So that means if I am selective about where I give my energy, I'm also being selective about where the energy is going and how it's being used.
Yes.
In other words, it's the selection process that basically enables me to exercise my power.
Yes.
By being selective, not by pushing power, but by being selective.
But what you're describing, though, is the part that is in your control. That's
right.
Selective. Yeah. That is one of the things in your control. You get to select what you believe, what you see, what's your reality, what surrounds you. And that's the beauty of it.
It is.
And so it's an incredible way to live. And things are going to work out. That's a fact. There's things are going to work out. Now, are they going to work out like you expect them to? I have no idea. One thing that people, when they hear me say, "Oh, they're going to work out," they're like, "Oh, well, how do you know?" And I go, "It's always going to work out." Now, I don't know how it's going to work out. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to work out. And I also have a story that no matter what happens, I'm going to thrive. I'm going to benefit. I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to have an abundance. That's the story I tell myself, and it's always true. It has always been true, and I believe it, and that will continue to happen.
I'm reminded of a cliche phrase that came along with the movie The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel that came out a few years back. The phrase that came through in the movie was, everything is going to be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, well, it's not yet the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Well, but that's the truth. One of the things that happens to at least people when I was young in the church, the Southern Baptist Church, every week almost without exception, the preacher would get up on a Sunday and tell us why Armageddon is at hand.
Mm.
It was when Iraq held hostages, then he pulled all the scriptures out and discussed, here's the prophecy that says this is about to happen. So, a 10-year-old kid sitting in church is like, oh my gosh, this book of facts is saying that this is the end. I mean, we're about to start Armageddon. It's going to be really bad.
Right.
And, when I was 10 and then it didn't happen, then something happened when I was 15 and something happened when I was 20. And, I've seen multiple Armageddon events that were allegedly right around the corner. And you get to a point that, we just haven't gotten there yet. And it's in the meantime, I've lived an incredible life. I've had a lot happen. And I don't have regrets, but the only thing that seems wasted is wasting my time on focusing on the Armageddons or the end, which never came. And, and that's just, again, you get where you place your energy, what you tell yourself, that is everything. That you can tell me I can talk to somebody for 5 minutes and see what they're talking about and realize, okay, that's where their energy is. I'm not judging. I'm just simply saying I can tell where
That's
their
it.
energy is. And and I also choose not to engage in all that. It just doesn't, there's no positive path forward. I met with 7 clients today, and not one session did anyone mention any of these things, that these
Mhm.
quote unquote events. All we were talking about is them, their focus, where their control is. That was it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody's aware of what it was, but I just directed our sessions to their stuff. Where are they at? Where are we going? How are we doing this? Brainstorming ideas, motivating ideas, and we never got around to the other stuff. And that's the story we were telling was what was right in front of us.
And this is why that story is so important. What you're outlining there so beautifully describes it very nicely. I'd like to also take it from a slightly different perspective and show how what we give our attention to works against what it is that we want.
Yes.
And the way that happens is we have a very strong tendency to describe, I don't want this, I'm against that, I oppose this, in other words, we express everything in terms of negation. We negate this, we negate that. And in the process, it's like there's a piece of us that thinks, well, if I just negate often enough, and if I negate consistently enough and say, no, 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 I'm not going to have to deal with that anymore because it's going to eliminate itself. And there's a failure to understand that's not how the energy works.
Correct.
You're actually talking, you're telling the story into existence by saying, not this, not this, not this. So that the real skill is not to say, not this, it's the real skill to say that instead. That's
Yes.
the part that people have the most trouble doing. If you want to mess with somebody's head who's into politics, ask them what they're in favor of without expressing it in terms of what they are not in favor of.
Sure.
I mean, their minds will just boggle on that because they don't do that. That's not part of their thought process.
One of the things that I'll never forget was a quote by Mother Teresa during the Vietnam War. She was very much a law of attraction person, whether she realized it or not.
Yeah.
So she was being interviewed, and she was always sort of snarky in interviews because she was like, she really was. She had a little attitude, and
just a tad. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's like, oh, here's a car, and she's like, look, I'm feeding starving children. Sell the damn car and give me the money and buy some food. So
Exactly.
yeah, so she could bring some real snarkiness to an interview, which I love, and so somebody told her that she felt she wasn't speaking up, the role that she needed to be at these anti-war protests. And somebody said, well, you've been criticized because you have not weighed in on the Vietnam War. You should be anti-war. And she said, I will not be at any anti-war protest. I will be at the first peace rally.
Yes.
And we will focus on peace. We're not going to focus on the war part. And when I heard that, I did not know what I know now, because I remember it a long, long time ago. It makes so much sense now that what she was saying. She wants to focus on what we want, not what we don't want. And that was profound, way before I even understood what the law of attraction was.
And I remember that also. And I remember the first time hearing it, being confused by it, because from my limited perspective at that point, I thought it was the same thing. I thought that being anti-war and pro-peace were identical.
Yes.
It took me a long time to realize they're not only are they not identical,
they're opposite. Yeah. And that's sort of that perspective when you're able to understand, like when people talk to me, obviously I'm a life coach, so I'm dealing with people with different problems and situations. So one of the things that people think would help is, well, okay, things aren't working out here in Richmond, so I want to move to Florida. And I said, why? I mean, where are you going to move to Florida? He said, well, things aren't working out here. So I have a saying to people that, I have no problem with you going to Florida. Don't run from Richmond, run to Florida. Yeah. Have something to go to. Don't run from someplace, go to someplace. So, the concept is different. It sounds the same, but the concept's different. I had a doctor, we talked about this several years ago. So I have a doctor that I went to an appointment, and as you know, I'm not a big fan of medical doctors. I mean, we often butt heads. They don't believe what I believe. So, so we were talking about, I had elevated something enzyme or whatever in my liver, and it really, because of my heavy weightlifting, it often skews that. And so the doctor's like, well, your liver enzymes are elevated. And I said, well, they're not really elevated. I explained why. And he goes, well, it could be your liver. And I go, but it's not, but it could be, but it's not. And so we're going back and forth. And so anyway, he said, well, it's really serious. You need to look at it. And I said, what's the worst that can happen? And he said, well, he starts, we go down this weird path. And he said, well, if you do have something wrong with your liver and we treat it early, there's like a 3% chance you would, die or something like that. And I go, what? He goes, well, yeah, I'm just saying, I want you to get this test. And I'm like, okay. So first of all, you're selling your concept by talking about dying. Instead of saying there's a 97% chance you're going to live.
Yeah. Right.
And but you're starting off by telling me that we'll do this, and then you only have a 3% chance of dying. I said, so what's my percentage of dying by not doing it? And so anyway, obviously I've been through multiple doctors because they don't understand. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with my liver. I'm in perfect health.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's this idea that standard medicine doesn't look at the bio-individuality of every person and their lifestyle and what they're doing. So but yet the narrative is often from a negative perspective, and that's telling a story from a negative perspective is literally creating a negative perspective. I can tell you my life story, and most of it, and I can make it sound incredibly sad and terrible.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's terrible.
It doesn't take a lot, actually. But
yeah. Or I can tell you the story that I see. I had a pretty wild childhood. Not the best, but I believe that childhood led me to everything that I started to study and believe in. I had a bad gambling addiction. I had a horrible, horrible recovery from that. Went to jail, lost everything. Those are things that I believe strengthened me. They led me to where I'm at, and they're part of my story. While I don't want to repeat any of them, I'm very aware they happened for a reason. So I tell that story as a victory story. I tell the story as a great comeback. I don't tell the story from that negative thing. It's just, and both sides would be true. I just choose to tell it this way.
And by making it the way that you tell it, you make that side true.
Absolutely. And I can make the other side true as well.
Good.
Yeah.
In fact, many people would choose that.
Many people do that.
Yeah. But you choose not to. You choose the other story.
Exactly.
So the point that I think that we can take away from this is that literally what we were talking about before, the whole selection process is extremely important.
Yes.
By recognizing our ability to select which kind of story we're going to tell to ourselves as well as to everyone else, we are in effect selecting what kind of life we're creating for ourselves.
Yes.
The storytelling creates the life.
Absolutely. And that's it. There's a company, and you don't need this, but they have created what they call mind movies. We've talked about this concept before, where you make a movie about the life you want. You script your own life.
I actually made one of those a few years back for myself.
Oh, cool. Did it work?
Yeah. It didn't give me everything yet that I wanted in the movie, but it definitely helped my mindset.
Sure. So, it's a great idea, but you don't really need the movie part. You can create the whole movie in your head. You know what I mean? You could,
right.
You can do that.
Well, I kind of needed to, just because at that point I did not feel like I had much imagination. So
exactly. You could serve. It serves. I have no problem with the concept, but I'm also saying, if you're in the right mindset, you can figure that out without it. And so one of the things that I find is really, one of the Abraham Hicks, things they suggest is, when you sit down and you sort of, you visualize, you plan, you here's what I want it to be. I envision what the next steps are. I envision what's going on. all of it is positive. I have no idea what exactly. I don't get very specific into things. I just remind myself that, I have everything in my life now that I ever possibly could have imagined. And I was doing an interview with this guy does a podcast for active senior citizens.
Okay.
And it's really, and he was interviewing me just, on sort of my lifestyle. Somebody told me about what sort of my lifestyle and what I do. And, I'm still in the gym. I'm still really strong. And he was asking me about all that. And I said, look, here's the checklist of things that I am shocked about getting older. When I figured I'd hit age 60, I was assuming, okay, so here's the narrative that most people have. Everything starts to fall apart. I'm 60. I can still deadlift 500 pounds. I'm healthy. I'm on no medications.
How many people on the planet can say that, by the way?
Yeah, how many of any age can say that?
Any age. I don't care what age you're talking about.
I truly believe, and maybe this is why it is, my brain is far better at 60 than it was at 30. I really believe that. I'm cognitively more aware. My ADHD is something I've turned to my advantage. I suffer no depression. I suffer no anxiety. I have no addictive issues any longer. And that's my reality. So the idea that I'm a much better physically and mentally than I was at 30 is hard to believe, because that's not the narrative that took place. Now, yes, my hair necessarily might not be hanging on there as nice as I'd like. It's still there, but it obviously it's work. It's sort of in protest, turned gray, thinned out. But nonetheless, it's still there. But it doesn't. I'm not saying it's all there, but I have no knee pain. I have no joint pain. I do have some shoulder pain from working out, but I have that very well managed. So the reality of 60 is far greater than I ever could have imagined. Now, is that because I've just never accepted aging? I just don't accept it. And I tell the story. I expect to go to the gym and lift. I expect to go do all those things. So that's my reality. And I believe that's what caused it. Again, to be in the health that I'm in and have the strength I have and have the career I have. I can work, I work, a lot of hours a week, not because I have to, because I love to. Being in a place, this is a far better existence than I ever thought being older would do. I used to call this old age. If this is old age, then man, I'm doing it really damn well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
So that's sort of the perspective, and I believe it influences. So when I was talking to this guy, he goes, but you have to admit that you're going to eventually die, and I will eventually die. I accept that. But nonetheless, until then, I don't have to go in with the attitude of everything's falling apart. I'm miserable. Having recovered from, extreme addiction, depression, anxiety, all the stuff that I had to go through, having recovered from that and having such a calm life now, not because I have a lot of chaos around me, but I'm very calm about it. I bring everything to the table in a real calm manner. I know I'm very confident in what I do as a person, as a life coach in my career. And all of that I'm just saying that because this isn't what I imagined when I was 30, what 60 would be like. Cause I was a basket case at 30.
It was me terrible. Too, actually.
Yeah. It
30 was a rough year for me.
Very rough year. I mean, I if you want to compare years at 30.
No, not really.
Okay.
I have a pretty good idea where yours was.
Yeah. So, but you get my point. So I'm excited that I have discovered this. So the story I tell myself every day is what keeps this going. And I am a human being. There are days that I don't always wake up feeling like it's a great story, but I quickly adjust the story before I walk out the door. The story will be consistent. The story will be there. And that's the importance of it. Is what you tell yourself before you walk out the door, what you're expecting for the day, and what you're believing about yourself, that will come true.
And this idea of a story, of a narrative, because that's what a story is.
Yes.
A narrative is a story. A story is a narrative. It is a useful concept for a number of reasons, not the least of which is understanding why there is this world of polarity, why stuff is going on. People want to know, why is all this going on? Well, they're all narratives.
Yeah.
One of the more interesting narratives from my perspective, because I mean, you don't pay attention to them. I actually do pay attention to them with a great deal of distance. I sit back and I don't immerse myself to the point where I start getting sucked up into it. But I do pay attention. And one of the interesting narratives to me that has been going on for a number of years, not even right now, but over the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years, has been the narrative of what science is. And the narrative has been played out primarily by the popular media, by popular books, and so on and so forth, popular articles that all promote one basic fallacy, which is that there is such a thing as scientific proof. Now, if you actually look at the scientific method, in other words, the method that science claims to follow in terms of how it does its scientific work, or how individual scientists do their scientific work, the scientific method basically has two steps. First step is create your hypothesis. Second step is go out and find some evidence. And then there's actually a third step, which is to go back to the first step, which is, okay, you found your evidence. Now revisit your hypothesis. Make some adjustments. Now that you've made some adjustments, go out and get some more evidence. Now that you've got some more evidence, readjust your hypothesis again. Now go get some more evidence. It's a cycle that goes on. And the thing I want to point out is there is no proof step in that series. Proof does not exist in the scientific method. So anytime you hear anybody telling any narrative, because that's what they're doing, they're telling narratives. Anytime you hear a narrative that says, this is scientifically proven to be true, or this is scientifically proven to be not true, there are two things you can take away from it. Number one, they're not scientists.
Right.
Because scientists don't actually talk that way.
Right.
And number two, they don't understand what science is, because science doesn't do that.
Right.
That's not what science is about. And the reason I point that out is not to debunk the whole thing about proof. It's to point out this is a way to understand it's just a narrative. It's just a story that's being told. It's not an authoritative proof. It's not an authoritative fact that is undeniable and unavoidable. It's not engaged in and ingrained and etched in stone. It's a belief. It's all it is a belief that's being promoted. And you understand that, and you say, well, okay, then why am I getting all worked up about it?
Yeah, but that's, you're getting worked up about it because that's what you're programmed to do.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And boy, also because you're giving a lot of attention to it too.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we're programmed to give attention, then be, oh, well, let's react. I was, one of the things that, I walk people through, like, for example, gravity. Would you agree gravity exists?
Yeah, well, I experience it fairly regularly.
Yeah. Gravity's a constant. Do you think we've proven gravity exists? Is that something that's been proven?
No, because there's no such thing as scientific proof.
Yeah. So, but most people would agree gravity's, it's there. It's not negotiable.
Sure.
And I'm not arguing gravity from the ability, but if we look at ourselves, in physical form as we are, if you believe in the non-physical, if you believe you have a soul, you believe that. So when you transition to non-physical, gravity doesn't exist anymore. Because what Abraham Hicks, Esther talks about this one thing, gravity it's a law on Earth and it's a law on planets, but it doesn't apply to the non-physical. Gravity is not a law. It is what takes place in the form you are, but when you take away the dimensions of the body and you're just pure energy, there's no gravity there. It's not affecting that. It doesn't have so even the stuff we believe in, when you see the other side of it, it doesn't apply universally. Right. And that's important. You realize it's because, that's why, my, the most frustrating thing in my entire world remains the double slit experiment that we talk about frequently. Yes. And,
you've mentioned that a few times.
Yes. And it really irritates me and bugs me crazy. And so I have to stay away from it, but, go figure that out.
You know what they say, about any kind of thing like that. The truth will set you free, but first it's going to piss you off.
Yeah. And I don't know if it'll ever quit pissing me off, but, it's like, why did I even study that? I don't even want to, why did I? Oh, it hurts. It really hurts to study that. But it makes no sense. It's not logical, but yet it's real. So the stories you tell yourself they have energy, they have power, they have, the direction. So when a photon is influenced by human observation or by observation, and you're like, that sounds impossible. but yet it's been proven time and time again. So it's not impossible, but yet we do that with other things. I'm using that one because it's the most obvious in my mind. But there's several things. So like when people believe anything, like you're saying, scientific, that's a category that you can agree that here's the most likely event. Here's what's happening. Here's what we think. There's hypotheses around that.
Right.
But it's ironclad, and that's what I was talking about earlier about doctors. They have become so focused on the middle, like they're focused on just like there is no bio individuality. They don't look at a person. I was explaining earlier that the doctor thought my liver enzymes were elevated. When you lift weights really heavy, those enzymes exist in muscles as well as your liver. So when I tear down my muscles, I release those enzymes. Now, there isn't this ALT and AST if you ever have a blood test. So if you look at that, they're in my muscles. So I go get I get blood drawn after I work out a day or two before. Then all of a sudden I have these elevated things. Now, because they're most plentiful in the liver, the doctor is like, your liver enzymes. And I keep telling him they're not liver enzymes. They're not. They exist in the liver, but they exist in other parts. So I have to educate a doctor on this every time, and and I told the guy, I said, look, Google it. Here, I sent him a link before we even review these tests. We're not going to spend all this money on liver scans when we've done that already. There's nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But you're stuck on what you're viewing as scientific, and it's not. You're not looking at the whole picture. It's like asking somebody about their, tell me about your pain, Walt, if you have a headache or something. And if I don't ask you about your lifestyle, how much you sleep, how do you eat, do you smoke cigarettes? If I don't ask all that, then there's no chance of me guessing what's wrong with you. It's not. I mean, I need to ask all those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, as we move forward, the internal belief system that we have drives everything. And you're in charge of that, but it's hard to reprogram it for a while too. If you grow up your entire, what's that? Oh yeah, it does. It does. Growing up with a belief system that is just ingrained as you in fact, and then you walk away. One of the phenomenons when people escape from North Korea. Let's say they make it in South Korea, and then they take them to a safe place, and they have to sequester them for like 6 months and really retrain them because they have such a crazy narrative based on all these things that they've been told about their leader and all the stuff he's done. He's beat Tiger Woods at a round of golf. He's done all, and
which is incredible to think about.
Which is so silly. But if you think about it, they're brainwashed. They really believe it. They're not trying to be ignorant. They're like, well, that's just fact. It's just fact. He beat Tiger Woods. He beat Michael Jordan 1-on-1 in basketball. I mean, it's like, and they believe that. So they have to go through a 6-month process, roughly, of really re-indoctrinating them and really letting them know what's going on. They grew up at this point, all of them that are there grew up where all the information they received was strictly controlled by their family, the governing family, and it was absurd stuff. But you believe it. You have no choice. The kids are taught to worship it. If you say anything negative about the leader, children are encouraged to turn their parents in.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that's going to have a lot of effect on what the narrative is.
Sure.
In fact, you were mentioning gravity a moment ago, and very surreptitiously inserting the thing about proof. I love that. But I want to make take that same concept and play it out a little bit, because gravity, regardless of whether it's proven or not, is useful. I don't have to have a proof about gravity to know that it's useful, because I use it all the time. And
Right.
in fact, we all do. I mean, the world makes sense because of gravity.
Yes.
So the question that comes into my mind is, well, do I need to prove it? Not really.
No.
I mean, it's there. I keep using it. I keep relying on it. I can count on it every single day. Do I need to prove it? I don't need to prove anything.
Yeah. I mean, there's
so we don't really need to have proof for that. The real question is, do we need to have a narrative for it?
Yes.
And that, I would say the answer is yes. I think humans have pretty much collectively decided, yeah, we need to have that narrative.
Yes.
about gravity. It's how we make sense out of our world.
Well, I agree. And that's what happens. And, so using the bigger picture. So, and how we can tie all this together, I think, is we grow up with a belief system, and we're often told what we believe from our parents, and then we learn the educational system, and most of it's pretty solid stuff. It's not nothing too far out there. But then when things come to challenge that, and it's really hard. People say, well, that like one of the things that really, really frustrates people is there is a lot of study. Like, people believe that when I was younger, my parents used corporal punishment, and I'm a better person for that.
Oh yeah.
And they really believe that. It is something they grew up. They said, look at me, I turned out fine, and my parents spanked me. So I would first of all challenge you. Turned out fine. You wouldn't be sitting here if you didn't. Is what I have to say. But anyway, let's.
You won't even go there.
Yeah, we'll go beyond. But the reality is that there's people to this day that believe that is absolutely the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but if you really understand that what that does and how it works, you might get your kids to mind, but there's other consequences of that. So it's all about what perspective you tell about that. But the truth is that there isn't good corporal punishment. There is, you're basically using, force against a child. And I probably got spanked on my butt a few times as a child, and I don't really think I was greatly scarred by it, but that's not the point. I had many other things scarring me, so that was the least of them.
You had a few things going on.
Yeah. So I'm not a great example anyway, but the idea that somehow that this is right because we've always done it this way, or this is what's always happened. It's somehow that's good. So changing all of that, changing belief systems, changing things, even though they're based on nothing, they're based on historical stuff or what you did as a child. Like the stuff I used to get in. My mom smoked cigarettes for most of her life, and I remember us getting into her car and she's smoking away with her friend in the front seat. We're all being, the kids are in the back seat. Smoke. Nobody even thought anything about that. We're sitting there, it's just like, well, it's just secondhand smoke. Kids are fine. Don't worry about it. They're kids. They'll be fine. And we didn't think it was weird, And in fact, you get to a point, you're sort of immune to it. You don't even smell it. Nowadays, if I'm around anybody smoking, because it's so rare, I'm like, oh my God, that's so strong, But again, things change, but yet we don't want to change. We're predisposed not to change. And that's why telling a story that's different from your reality currently or your belief to a better reality seems so hard.
It's also worth noting too that you mentioned that things change. Well, how do they change? They change because people change their narratives.
Yes.
People change the storyline.
Yes.
If they didn't change the storyline, the change wouldn't have happened.
Well, exactly. You know how many times in my life we've gone from eggs being good for you to eggs being bad for you?
I don't even know. Which is it right now? Is it bad for you or good for you right now? I can't even keep track anymore.
I think we've settled a few eggs every day are good for you, I think.
Oh, okay.
I've always instinctively known eggs are almost the perfect food. I eat eggs every day of my life. I eat a lot of eggs. I don't limit to, me, I eat, when I go hard. I might eat 6 eggs a day sometimes.
Yeah. You don't do things by halves.
So my cholesterol's perfect. It works great. The cholesterol that's found in eggs is, by the way, this is another programming concept. When you hear cholesterol, you think, oh my God, that's deadly. Do you understand cholesterol is one of the most important nutrients in the body?
Yeah.
It literally it's part of what your brain is made of.
Right.
It is hormones are created using cholesterol. It's one of the balancing. Cholesterol is one of the top 2 or 3 most important chemicals in your body.
In fact, if you had no cholesterol in your brain, you wouldn't have a brain.
You would have a brain. And so one of our things is, cholesterol clogs the arteries. And so one of the best things we can do is get rid of all the cholesterol. So they have medication now that rips the cholesterol from your body.
Mm.
It's just one of the things that if you, and these are things you can Google. There is no proof that removing cholesterol through a statin reduces heart attack. No proof.
Isn't that really odd?
Yeah,
Because I mean, that's one of the most commonly prescribed things.
yeah, and there's like, well, we need to reduce your cholesterol. However, there's not a reduction in heart attacks by people. It's like, oh, wait a minute. And the other thing is statins, for example, they remove an enzyme. Coenzyme Q10 is a necessary enzyme in the body.
Right.
Statins rip that from the body as well.
Right.
So that's necessary for heart health. So again, and this isn't a medical show tonight, but it's just the concept of perspective and how a narrative can take over. Cholesterol is bad. If you walked up to 10 people on the street, is cholesterol good or bad? I would think 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, would say it's bad.
In fact, there's a cliche that occurs to me that really illustrates how this is a narrative that we're talking about here. Because it's very easy to come to the conclusion that what we're really talking about here is a medical fact that everyone should be paying attention to.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the way it's usually presented. But it's actually a narrative.
Yes.
And the way to understand that it's a narrative is to remember that anytime, in theory, whenever you're talking about this kind of thing on a show like this, you're supposed to put the disclaimer in, right? What does the disclaimer say? The disclaimer says, we're not giving medical advice here. Why is that important? Because that tradition, or that, if you want to call it regulation, if that regulation that requires people who are not medical doctors to say no medical advice is being given here, is in deference to the medical doctors. In other words, it is in deference to the narrative that medical doctors tell that medical doctors don't want to be contradicted.
Yes. Yeah, well, exactly.
There is a narrative.
Exactly.
A story that's being told.
Yeah. And with the idea, like, for example, one of many things I do in my life coaching, I work with a lot of people with addiction. Addiction is sort of how I got into the field. That was my specialty in the beginning. I've grown from that, but still work with a lot of people with addiction. And as I've stated before, I am not a fan of the 12 steps of recovery. And
yeah, I got that impression.
Yeah, I don't like them, and I don't think they're effective. However, early in my career, when I was in private practice, I was cautioned several times by people of, you can't say that. You can't say that. And so I had to dance it around. Well, not 12 steps aren't great for everyone, but blah, blah, blah. And I still say, if 12 steps work for you, I want you to recover. I don't care how we get there.
There are 6% who benefit.
Yeah,
so,
on a high level 6%, but
okay.
Let's say 6%. But nonetheless, I have no problem if it works for some. I'm not saying no, but when you say, if you go see your doctor today and just your family doctor, you say, hey, I think I have a drinking problem. What I want to do, your doctor is automatically going to say, just go to AA, and they'll tell you what to do. And so if the doctor were to prescribe to you any other medicine or strategy that had a 4 to 6% success rate, he would lose his license. You can't,
unless it was approved by the FDA. But yes, I take your point.
Well, of course. But I'm crossing my fingers. We don't have many FDA approved drugs. They're only 4% effective. But you're right. Good point. I don't trust them either. But there is a criteria for FDA to approve something, and they've never approved a drug that's 4% effective. So, but within that, it would be. But yet they have no problem doing that because that's just the general consensus. Well, as my career advanced and I got more, just secure in who I am and more well-known, and, now you can't cancel me. So I'm like, yeah, they're terrible. They're terrible. If they work, I'm not going to talk you out of it's working for you, but especially for people under 30, the success rate goes drastically down.
Does it really? How far down does it go?
Oh, it's less than 1% for people. When you get under 21 and under, it's less than 1%.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, and then it's like 2 to 3% gradually as you get up. But nonetheless, it is still considered that. And the reason that it doesn't operate on a position of power. It says you're powerless. You're an addict for the rest of your life. You can never have a beer again. This is a disease that it's incurable. But if you try real hard and you're really honest, then maybe God will give you favor and find recovery. True story. I'm not making that
That's
up.
essentially what it adds
Yeah.
up to. Yeah.
Yeah. However, if you don't make it, it's not the program's fault. It's because you weren't being honest with yourself. Always.
Yes.
That's their answer.
So basically, it's the classic no-win scenario.
Yes. And, and so they have it set up where, and again, there's been millions of people that have found recovery with 12 steps because that was all we had for so long.
Yeah.
When I went to jail for my addiction to gambling, I lost everything, lost everybody. I got out and I ended up at this sober living, transitional living home that was 12-step program based. I recovered. You know what my recovery motivation was? I don't like jail. I don't like jail. I don't know if you like jail, Walt, but
not particular. Well, I've never experienced it, but I really want to try to avoid
yeah,
that if I can.
yeah. It's not. I mean, I will tell you that food's really bad and the company is sketchy. You know, so it's boring most of all. But nonetheless, I don't like jail. I made a direct connection to my out of control gambling addiction. Led me to do things that put me in jail. So I cannot gamble anymore if I don't want to be in jail. So if I would have went to a voodoo treatment center where we're stabbing dolls with needles, or I went to a crystal healing center, and you know how I feel about crystals as well, I would have recovered. Because it wasn't the 12 steps. I didn't want to go to jail anymore.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Are you saying that there's rationality to all this?
Of course not. That would be crazy. But my point is, I told the story that I cannot gamble anymore, or I will not be able to stay out of jail. It's not a lifestyle. So I changed my story. And whatever action I took was going to be good action. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense. And
it makes a lot of sense.
And as far as
the point we've been making for the last 47 minutes.
Yes. And as far as like when I was at those meetings, to be honest with you, I did appreciate the fellowship and the camaraderie for the people there. That was nice. But the reality is there's nothing they told me that helped, I didn't think. And if anything, I left the meeting wanting to gamble more than I ever wanted to gamble for because everybody's talking about gambling. If I tell our audience right now to look around your room and do not look for the color red, you can't stop doing that. You did. So going to a meeting and say, do not gamble, your brain's hearing gamble. That's right. Gamble. And so I would go all day really focused on getting my life back, doing what I needed to do, and wanted to stop. And then I'm triggered by going to a meeting, where somebody's telling me, I won $100,000 last night and lost it all. I'm like, that's not what I need to hear, And so my focus wasn't, I was like we were talking earlier about the anti-war one. I had to readjust what I wanted. I wanted a life free of the encumberment of gambling. I didn't want to do that anymore. So I didn't focus as much on not gambling as creating the life that didn't require me to gamble. Getting whatever I was getting out of gambling, trying to get it another way. And so I had to look at it. I didn't know I was doing all that at the time, and so the programs that I like, there's a program that's very popular now called Smart Recovery for people in addiction. It is a far more effective program. It's based on cognitive behavioral therapy. You can go to a meeting and say, nobody asked you, did you drink or gamble tonight? Nobody cares. I mean, that I don't mean in a negative way, but they're like, okay, we're glad you're here. Yeah, let's focus on now. And instead of like, oh, well, here's your white chip. You've lost your recovery. Here's a new chip. They don't do all that. And it's a really effective program. It's one that I refer my clients to often. And so there's other side, but so much of everything we do, as you're saying, that's why I love this topic. The story you tell yourself creates that reality. And when you realize I am completely in charge of the story I tell, it's so amazing when you figure that out.
Well, I honestly think the hardest part of the whole thing is actually believing that that's true.
Yeah,
I mean, I even to this day now, you and I have been talking about this overall topic as part of our law of attraction discussions for about 12 years now.
right.
And in those 12 years, we've had, I don't know how many umpteen conversations along this particular line. I still have times where I just can't quite believe it. But I have so much experience now telling me that it's true that it's kind of hard for me to not believe it.
Yeah,
You actually have to kind of go through this transition period that can take quite some time in which you say, wow, is that really? Wow, it really is. Wow, is that really? Wow, it really is. It really is. What? Is it really? It just, it seems to go on endlessly.
it
I think
does.
what actually happens is I'm basically over time shedding a little bit of this doubt, a little bit of that doubt, a little bit of this disengagement, a little bit of that disengagement. I'll put that one aside. I'll put this little bit aside. I'll take off this layer, one layer at a time. I'm getting closer and closer to the point where I have complete total belief in it. It
Yes.
takes a while.
It takes a while, and then once that becomes, that's the beauty of it. When I loved our early times and us talking about law of attraction, because neither one of us knew very much.
No, we're trying to
Um,
figure it out.
yeah, and we both believed it, but we didn't know how to really implement it. And we grew together in a lot of this, and
Right.
we sort of, and as this started implementing and as this started changing, I realized the power of believing the story you tell yourself, and then the fact that I then I had to believe the fact that that matters so much. There's nothing more important than your internal dialogue, and that's part of telling your story. There's nothing. That's where you start. Most people have the most brutal inner dialogue. They're very
Yeah.
negative. Uh, they are unintentionally anticipating the worst to happen, and their dialogue supports that.
Yeah.
And it's there's nothing more damaging than a negative internal dialogue. It's just, and like one of the things that happens a lot with people that first get into this, like when we start talking this way, and it's like, well, my internal dialogue's this, or my internal dialogue's that. And it's like, but it's real. I go, it's real because you're making it real. Like I said, I've had some crazy, intense things happen to me in my life. And I could have easily, if I didn't discover this, I could have believed that I had a belief system that I was just destined to repeat all that. I was destined to do what my crazy ass family did. And I was destined to be that. And I, by whatever happened, whatever that and I'm so grateful that I came across it. I have some friends that people that know me that think I'm absolutely crazy. They really do. And I don't deny that, by the way. I sort of, I don't mind that
That's what I
process, but
love about you, actually.
yeah. But reality, I mean, yeah, I believe it that much. And it's like, okay, I don't need you to not think of it. None of that matters. None of that matters.
I'm reminded of something that I experienced within the last 2 or 3 weeks that kind of caps off what I was just saying a moment ago about how it takes a while to build that belief system. It takes a while to let go of the old beliefs and to really start accepting that, yeah, my perspective really does matter. What I give my attention to really does matter. It kind of came back to me in an unexpected way a couple of weeks ago. I'd been seeing a woman. We went out on 4 dates together, had a great time, but it ultimately didn't work out. And the way that she broke up with me is what told me how much growth I had experienced, because she got to know me pretty well and understood that I did this podcast, that you're one of my co-hosts and so forth. She actually listened to some of the episodes. And when she broke up with me, she said, you don't just do a podcast, you are LOA. And that's why you're not right for me. And I thought to myself, well, that's really interesting.
I think that's the best compliment anybody could ever give
It
you.
really is. It was the nicest breakup I've ever experienced.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, well, damn, what's her number? I'd like to tell her. Hey, if you're listening, get the number from Walt. Just tell. I think I'm more LOA than him, to be honest with you. So.
But I mean, that kind of brought home for me, wow, I apparently have have developed and grown far beyond even what I realized I had done. I needed to have somebody mirror it back to me in order to see just how much growth there really was.
What an amazing, seriously, that's a great breakup. I really respect that she
Yeah,
did it that way.
I do too.
Yeah,
I
and
totally
it cannot be better than that.
right.
And you know, I guess I have, when I say I've lost friends, I don't view, there's not official breakup of friendships, but there's less and less people that want to hang out when, you know, this is your mindset, and that's okay. It's I have the right people in place,
Right.
but not everybody's able to have this. You know, I like me going to a dinner party. Can you imagine my conversations at a dinner party?
I don't have to imagine. I know what it's
No,
like.
no, yeah, it's like, okay, I can imagine people going home and it's like, man, that dude is weird,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, some people I get into great, and other people you can just say, okay, let me slowly back away.
Yeah. Right.
You know, and it's not, but none of that matters, and that's sort of because of the story I've told. I could not be more pleased with everything that I developed in my life, the story and the life that I've created. It's amazing. It really is. And I'm in awe of it. Like, wow, I mean, I really did this, and it feels fantastic. It's not an arrogant statement. It's just a way to apply it. And so I am very big on internal dialogue, the storytelling concept. And you were talking about how slow it is to change. And you know this, but just to make sure the audience understand, your conscious brain can change instantly opinions.
Oh yeah.
Your subconscious brain, you don't have direct access to, so it takes a long time.
Mhm.
You got to suggest it over and over again. So like day one, that's why most people who start looking into the law of attraction try to use it to their advantage. They have a hard time because the energy that they're feeling and the emotions they're putting out are based on the subconscious programming.
Right.
Until you really develop a subconscious mindset of gratitude, then where your baseline is gratitude for everything, then you know it takes a while to do that. You can't instantly do it.
And you do it by degrees, a little tiny
Yes.
steps at a time.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. But if you're willing to keep at it and just keep going, you do get there. Sometimes you have to have, you know, an experience like I had to kind of remind you, you really have been taking all these steps. Look how far you've come.
Yeah, it's
But
amazing.
you get there.
Yeah.
It just takes time.
And that's the beauty of it. And there's nothing there in my mind, there is nothing more powerful. It's the, you know, and I do, you know, I tell people all the time, I'm 95% Abraham Hicks. You know, I'm really on board with most of the thing. And, you know, and she states in Law of Attraction that is the most powerful law in the universe, the law of attraction.
Yeah.
You know, and it fixes so many things when you understand how to use it. It's not a law of attraction. We used gravity earlier. It's not a positive thing. It just is a thing. It's not a we can make it positive.
We choose to make it a positive.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But it's not inherently positive.
Right.
It just exists. So it's going to feed back to you what you're feeling, and you're going to keep getting what that is until you learn to really feel differently, and not be triggered by everything. We're going to keep repeating the same experiences.
And there's a really fun side to it also, because you do this long enough, you spend enough time focusing on this, talking about this, you end up with, like you were describing, you have a great circle around you of people who are like-minded, spread out around the globe. I find my own circle. In fact, my circle started to expand recently locally. There was a meetup group, the Esoteric Spiritual Warriors meetup group.
Wow.
I went to join the meeting, and it was people who think like us. It's like, oh, this is cool. I love this. I mean, it's a small group. Hey, it's more people than I knew, you know, before I went to the meetings. And so my point is that kind of thing comes to you more often. You end up getting more and more experiences like that.
Yes.
Building that new network. So yeah, you lose the old network, but it gets replaced with a new network, and the new
yes.
network.
And yeah, and then when you have that energy, I have the most bizarre, if you just looked at the individuals in my circle, you're like, my God, that's a weird circle there. I mean, because they're all over the place. I have doctors, you know, I have just a very diverse group, but we all have that same thing in common. And you know, we just run across these people, and it doesn't mean that everybody has to think the exact way I do. I have, you know, most of the people I know from my gym, that's most of my socialization is at my gym, because I'm there every day. You know, I'm sure most of them, they know I'm a positive guy. They like that, but I don't, you know, sell all this to them unless they ask. But I do correct their attitudes. Like, well, it's all, you know, like when they come in and They say, "How you feel?" A little draggy. And I go, "Well, your brain's a little draggy. You're not, just and like I always, most people when they ask me, and I'm sure this gets annoying, how are you doing today? I go, fantastic. Every day I say fantastic, and people are like, really fantastic? Yeah, and it's like, yeah, I just tell myself I'm fantastic, and shockingly, I'm fantastic.
That's almost more powerful to say it that way, because
Yeah.
that's the part that kind of wakes you up like, wait a minute, what does telling yourself have to do with it?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, it's everything. It has everything to do with it.
Yeah. Well, the thing, my biggest struggle, most of my life, and you and I have discussed this before, when people get into the law of attraction, it's usually for one or two things. Usually, is relationships or money, and health sometimes.
Health,
but
I was going to say it's three.
Yeah. But the ones I hear the most are relationships and money.
Sure.
And my struggle was, especially growing up how I grew up with a lack mindset, and then developing a gambling problem, which is in case anybody didn't realize, that's not a great way to make money.
It's a fairly lackful.
Yeah, it's very lacking, and that conditions you to be very negative to money, because you lose and you lose and you lose, and it just, you eventually think you're going crazy because you can't win at some point. But yet, once I was able to realize that all of this is just the story I'm telling myself about, and it was real, the story of poverty and lack. And, my mom was always lack-minded, always worried about, once I changed to abundant mindset and really believed it, there's no looking back. It's not a thing anymore. It's just, finances are never a worry anymore. That's so nice. It's such an incredibly positive way to live, because that was so much of it. I laugh because, 15 years ago, there was nothing that occupied my brain more than finances.
And while I haven't quite evolved as far as you have, I'm a lot closer than I was before, to the extent where now finances don't fret me anymore. I mean,
Yes.
I still have an awareness, because I haven't totally put that to bed, so to speak. But I was noticing just the other day how I went out and spent some money that if I had been pressed to spend that money 5-10 years ago, I would have been in a panic mode. And today, like, well, big deal. It wasn't even a second thought. I said, wow. Now there's a big shift that I've made right there.
Yeah.
Compared to where I was, that was a massive shift.
Yeah, I ordered a car in October, and I've been waiting on it forever.
I saw that, yeah.
And it's a new model of the Lexus SUV, and I loved it. And so I've been waiting and waiting and waiting. So finally, the guy said, "Your car's here. You want to come test drive it?" I go, "Yeah, but I want to buy it. I want to get it." And so we go there, and he's like, "Okay, well, let's get going." I said, "Well, how much do I write the check for?" And he's like, "Well." He wasn't used to that, and I said, "Well, just what does it cost?" He just was shocked by that statement. And I said, "Well, let's go." And
he's still used to financing cars.
Yeah, and I said, "Well, I said, do you have any? Now?" If he had 0% interest, I was going to be all over that. But in this market, in a brand new vehicle, there's not going to be 0%. So I said, well, okay. I said, and so I spoke to my tax guy, and I said, we could lease it, I could just buy it, or we could finance it. What do you want? What do you think's best? And he goes, unless they give you a great deal, just buy it. Because you're going to make that interest on, like, by doing that. Sure. And I did, and it was just the ability to do that. And he was shocked at the question. He's like, well, do you have a check? What are you going to give me a check? I said, I'll write you a check. And he's like, oh, okay. And so it's a different way to live. It doesn't, it's cool. It's but I'm not saying that to any way come across, it's just, once you adjust that, there's never a moment of that. I didn't have buyer's remorse. I bought what I bought. I love it. And it's, it gets ungodly bad gas mileage, which doesn't help. But what the heck? It's just what it is. And it takes premium gas too, which compounds.
Just to add insult to injury, except that you don't even care.
I don't care. I don't care. Yeah. So, but that's that mindset. So I really, if we leave one message, telling the story of the life that you want and the thing, that's really important. But understanding, you got to eventually tell the story from your subconscious. It has to come from, that's why it takes a while. You keep doing it, and then one day your subconscious brain buys into it.
And I know in my own case, one of the things that I didn't realize it at the time, but I now looking back, I can tell that it was true. I needed to let go of the idea that other people have to change their mindset while I'm changing mine.
Yes.
I didn't really realize that was going on inside me, but it was. And it's taken a while, but I have gotten to the point now where, you can have whatever mindset you want. It's all right with me. And it really is all right with me. That's a major step forward.
Truly getting to a place where you accept other people's mindset, and they're allowed to have whatever, the art of allowing, being able to do that. And there are moments where I will have to, especially when somebody takes just a bizarre, hardcore statement about something, I can quickly get to, wait a minute, don't let that go. I don't have to let that trigger me, because there's a narrative like, okay, that's the most unhinged thing I've ever heard. But wait a minute, it's none of my business. I don't care. And I don't have to be affected by it.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to be affected by it, and you aren't, as long as you don't select it.
Yes,
that's really the bottom line. We
absolutely
literally do have the power through our power of selection. That power of selection, it isn't just about what we're selecting; it's about what we're not selecting.
Yes, and not looking toward that concept that inherently things are going to fall apart. It's just this idea that again, a lot of people write religiously with the ultimate end game is you're either Armageddon is going to happen or you're going to be burning in hell. I mean, those aren't great narratives to start. Unless you're Catholic,
they expect to come out of that. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I don't know. I was about to make a Catholic joke, but I want to let that go. My feeling on that. So
we'll just leave it. Sorry, that was too much of a setup. I take that one away.
Okay. Catholics. Never mind. So anyway, we'll move forward. But you're right. I don't want to. I've gotten letters from the Catholic Defamation League before, so I don't want to do that again today. No, really, I did. I really did.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I have to say, we found a way to take a wonderful topic, because I really love this topic. I enjoy talking about stories and narratives. I've really come to appreciate them, particularly over the last 5, 6, 7 years, just how powerful they are, just how valuable they are to me. Mainly because of what I just mentioned a moment ago. I can not only choose to select what I want to select for my story, for my narrative, for the story that I'm telling others, that I'm telling myself, but I can also choose which ones I'm not going to tell.
And tell the story of health, of abundance, of calm, of excitement, whatever you want to tell the story, but tell the story. Tell it. You're in charge of it. You hold the pen. That's the key. You hold the pen.
Yeah, pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
Joel, as usual, we knocked it out of the park, or threw the touchdown, depending on which way you want to use it.
Yeah, well, you know which one I'm going with.
So thank you very much, and thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
See you later.